Hello everybody and welcome back to the sit down. Let's get into talking about Caroline Dubois, how wonderfully she did on the undercard of the Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight. Also, let's talk about her and ALYCIA Baumgardner's, the start of what could potentially be a really interesting boxing rivalry that will lead into a big super fight. Before we get into all of that potential future pairing between the two of them, I do want to touch on Caroline Dubois and her performance on Friday night. So, of course, she appeared on the undercard of the Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight, which took place on Friday the 19th of December, broadcast on Netflix. Huge event. For some would say the right reasons, some would say the wrong reasons. That's neither here nor there. It has to be said though, Caroline Dubois was signed to MVP quite recently, excuse me, and this was her first outing on the MVP, under the MVP stable, and of course on like a mega broadcast as well. And I just felt that she handled the whole week, fight week, and going into fight night itself with such class, such quiet confidence, and it really, really impressed me, particularly because she's so young. She's in her mid-20s, and there's a lot of pressure. There must be a lot of pressure on her shoulders, or as there would be for anybody who is in that position. But she did handle it all very well. What kind of became apparent throughout fight week is this low rumbling of a bit of needle between her and ALYCIA Baumgardner. I had seen some things. I don't know all of the details of it, so I won't try to rehash them, but I had seen some things historically on social media, a bit of back and forth between the two. And it's very interesting because they're both now in the MVP stable under that same banner. And they were both in the same press conference together. And in that press conference, Caroline Dubois sort of made the point of, letting the public decide. Having both of them on the same card gives the public the opportunity to decide which of them is actually the better boxer. And ALYCIA Baumgardner, she bit back and she said, I'm the co-main event, or I'm the chief support, and you're just a puppy, and you kind of need to, as all puppies do, need to be taught and things like this, of this nature. And Caroline Dubois posted something on social media after that being like, who's the puppy here? And, she essentially, she clapped back, but in a very, I would say, classy way. And I really, really enjoyed it. I think that could be a very interesting future dust up. But before we get into the potentialities of that, I do want to say kudos to Caroline because, she was elevated to full champion. She's WBC lightweight champ. She was elevated to full champion after a belt was, the WBC belt was relinquished. And she was defending it against Camilla Panata. And it was a really good fight. It was really good to see some of her technical ability. She had been coming off of quite a long layoff. I believe it was over 200 days. And very needed and very interesting to see her back in action. Camilla Panata, a little bit novice-y in nature in terms of her boxing ability. And novice, and by novice, I don't mean like amateur novice. I mean, one could argue that Panata's skill set was, I don't want to say limited. That sounds really rude, but it didn't have a lot of adjustability, and she just kept doing a lot of the same stuff, which was essentially just coming forward and throwing hands, right? And it was very cool to see Caroline, working so well off of her lateral movements, picking the slightest angles just to reposition herself. Obviously, she had the massive reach advantage in there, and her timing was wonderful to see. She was throwing in between Panata's punches, and just, landing really good stuff in there. She dropped her in the 6th round off of a really short hook. And fair play to Panata. She came back, she got back on her feet, and she saw the fight through to the final bell. I'm sure Caroline wanted the stoppage. It definitely looked like she was aiming to get that stoppage because she was really overcommitting to the backhand quite a lot of the time. But, really fantastic. And, you know, her amateur pedigree and experience, and the fact that she's fought internationally as an amateur, I think was very evident in that fight. And I really enjoyed her fight. I think for me, it was probably fight of the night, although I have to say I didn't have 100% attention on a lot of the other fights. We were doing a DR Sports watch along on the night, so I was sort of engaged in conversation as well. But yeah, definitely that fight for me caught fire more so than the ALYCIA BAUMGARDNER fight, although she also dropped her opponent, that has to be said. And her opponent was, you know, a worthy competitor, also kept coming forward a lot of the time. Following the fight, Shakur Stevenson had tweeted something being like, Caroline Dubois is my new favourite female fighter, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I mean, a future potential matchup between these guys would be really interesting. Obviously, ALYCIA BAUMGARDNER, she came to the UK before she became undisputed. She came to the UK. She stopped Terry Harper on UK soil, and claimed all the belts at the time. And at the moment, Terry Harper's, you know, she's breathed a bit of life back into her boxing career. She's now a lightweight champion herself. She has one of the other belts. I can't remember which one. But I think a potential fantastic litmus test would be, and a way to develop this fight further, would be for Caroline to face Terry Harper in a unification bout, see how she gets on, and it could just build a bit of more momentum, you know, for this potential matchup between Caroline Dubois and ALYCIA BAUMGARDNER. I personally feel that, you know, there's lots of talk about, well, ALYCIA has given lots of talk about being the face of female boxing. I actually feel that Caroline Dubois could be the future face of female boxing. She's young, she's hungry, she's already WBC champ. It would be so great to see her in some unification bouts. Obviously, Stephanie Han and Turan have the other belts, so there's potential out there for her to unify and hopefully become undisputed. And I think that the journey and the future is so bright for Caroline Dubois. So yeah, I'm very intrigued to know you guys' thoughts, what you think in terms of who would potentially win that matchup. You know, let me know in the comments. I'm very aware that ALYCIA BAUMGARDNER has the experience over Caroline Dubois, but yeah, really interesting conversation. Do let me know. You know, a few other touch points. I was thinking about maybe doing another video for this, but honestly, I don't think that that's probably necessary. But a few other talking points that I wanted to cover is we saw Craig Richards v Dan Aziz as the main event in Accra, Ghana over the weekend, and Craig Richards got the stoppage over Dan Aziz in the final round. Really interesting contest in the light heavyweight division. You know, Dan Aziz was doing quite a good job of banking some of the earlier rounds and, and building some momentum early on in the fight. He was doing some lovely work, you know, dipping under Craig's shots. Obviously, Craig's a lot taller, although I think their reaches are fairly similar because Dan's got quite long arms. But he was dipping under a lot of Craig's shots, and as he was dipping under, he was throwing jabs and backhands, and they were landing. But Craig just paced that fight so well. He waited until the latter portion of the fight, which some would argue is a risky move, but he waited until the latter portion of the fight to really like amp up the pace. He waited until Dan got quite tired, and then he started coming with the double phase attacks and eventually got the stoppage in the final round. I think that it was a statement win for him, definitely a statement win for him, and a really good performance. You could see how much it meant to him. A shame that obviously it's always a shame when you like both boxers and you have a lot of time for both boxers. But yeah, I'm sure it felt like a shame for Dan Aziz. He's posted something on social media afterwards, you know, very gracious in defeat. He's always been a gracious winner as well. He's a lovely guy. So yeah, wish him all the best with what he decides is the next best step for him. There's been a lot of murmurings around, you know, the potential fight between Craig Richards and Ben Whittaker. I've heard other talk about, you know, would it be a better idea for Ben Whittaker to face the loser of that fight, so face Dan Aziz? Who's to say? But I think that a future fight between, well, not that future, but yeah, a fight in the near future between Ben Whittaker and Craig Richards would be super, super interesting. So excited to see what the next step is in both of their journeys. And yeah, finally, just to say that Frank Warren has discussed a potential fight for Fabio Wardley. I think it's April. He's mentioned he's flagged the date as April for his first defense of the WBO title. Obviously, he was elevated to the status of full champion after Usyk relinquished and vacated the WBO belt. So, talking about Fabio's first title defense, which is very exciting for Fabio, isn't it? And I think he was mentioning that Derek Chisora is a name that he wants to throw into the mix. Laurie and I recorded an episode of Beyond the Ropes yesterday, which unfortunately, because of technical glitches, we weren't able to release. And I posed the question to Laurie saying, you know, is that a fight you'd be interested in? And he actually convinced me through, you know, his fantastic analysis, which he always has, that would be a really, really good fight. And commercially, it would make loads of sense because they could sell it as Derek Chisora's 50th fight, you know, 50th and final fight, Fabio's first title defense. It's kind of like the old guard versus the new guard. So yeah, potentially quite exciting. And I'm very intrigued to know what you guys think. Who would you like to see Fabio face for his first world title defense of the WBO belt? I think that's all we've got time for. I'm pretty aware that I've been waffling for quite a long time. So yeah, guys, don't forget to do all of the good stuff that we always ask you to do. Comment, like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned. I know it's Christmas week, so I'll be pretty slow on the videos this week, but hopefully get back on it next week. And yeah, if I don't jump on here before, wishing you all a very Merry Christmas, and stay tuned for the next episode of The Sit Down.